Hello, my friends. This is part two in a two-part series on how to make predictions of campaigns, of the outcomes of wars, of different kinds of events. In the part one, I gave you the procedure for how to find these things, how to make these predictions. Now I'm going to show you what I found for a very specific kind of event, which are these terrorist attacks that are called extreme Islamist terrorist attacks. And I have two examples that I'm going to show you of the attacks, and then I'll show you how I applied it to another event. The first attack was 9/11, the very famous September 11, 2001. And the time we have is 8 hours, 46 minutes, and 30 seconds is the time that astrologers have come up with for when that first airplane hit, the moment it hit the Twin Towers. And that is the moment, the exact moment when the thing begins. There's a lot of buildup, there's the hijacking of the plane, but that moment tells us a lot about the nature of the event. And in the 7 vibration chart, it's in the 7 vibration chart. That's the magic chart, the 7 vibration chart. And you might think, why 7 vibration? Because what's happening is that it's basically a tension between people who have ancient traditions, a deep internal life. They live by these ancient traditions that have been handed down, sometimes for thousands of years. And quiet, dedicated, thoughtful, humble, internal world. And then they perceive, it's all in perception. It's not so much a matter of what is. They perceive the United States as having all this bravado, all this pride, all of this sense of entitlement, and considering ourselves, the Americans, to be this like world power, and just pushing people around and pushing their agenda and feeling so proud and happy, and we're the land of the free, and you might say abusing and disrespecting them. I'm not saying that's what is. I'm saying that's what they are experiencing. They might not even be able to verbalize it. They might not even be able to explain it to you. That's what's happening. The 7 vibration is what these countries are attuned to, and it makes them suspicious of all of this enthusiasm and money and lifestyle and governmental policy of the West. And they think there's a lot of superficiality, like, what are you really doing for your families? What's really going on there, etc. That's the core motivation behind it. That's why it's 7 vibration, because the people involved in these attacks are attuned very strongly to the 7 vibration reality. That's what's going on. And they're expressing their 7 vibration in a violent way, but it's from their 7 vibration. And here's what we see in 9/11. When you look at the 7 vibration chart, oh my God, it's like crazy strong planetary configurations. Mercury's rising at the time of the attack. This is in the 7 vibration, or more commonly called 7th harmonic chart. Sun and Mars are right on the 7th house. Mars on the 7th house. You know, if you're an astrologer, does that make sense? Sun and Mars are on the 7th house because opposition Mercury, and Sun and Mars are also conjunct Uranus. In the vibrational charts, we have these very large orbs out to 16 degrees. I know that sounds a little crazy, but vibrational charts are not the same as birth charts. And out to about 10 or 12 degrees, they're solid. Beyond 12 degrees, they're getting really weak. So this is all within 9 degrees. It's there. Sun, Mars, Uranus. Now, if you saw Sun, Mars, Uranus in the birth chart, you would go, oh my God, there's just this explosion. This explosion happened. All the astrologers would be saying, oh, Sun, Mars, Uranus, at least Western astrologers. Well, there is a Sun, Mars, Uranus, and there was an explosion from a 7th harmonic group of people attuned to 7 vibration, who feel fed up, and they've had it. And they're this pent up feelings exploded. That's what happened. I know it's hard for people to believe that these vibrational charts mean so much. It's not as hard for the Vedic astrologers because they use this chart. They call it a Saptamsa chart. There it is, my friends. Sun, Mars, Uranus, and this kind of thing repeats over and over again. Another thing that repeats even stronger and much more consistently is Sun, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune. Those four planets connected in 7 vibration. And the Saturn-Neptune is, you might say, the heartbeat of it. Saturn-Neptune means your spiritual path, your personal vision, and what you've chosen. And Saturn-Neptune is cynical. It's suspicious of other things. It's trying to be honest. What's really going on here? Let's not just look over things. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of, you might say, phoniness that goes on in most things in life, like in churches. Is the Catholic Church consistent to its ideals? I don't have to go into all the gory details, but we know it isn't, or anything. So Saturn-Neptune is looking for what it considers to be sincere. Now, what the Saturn-Neptune decides is sincere and real may not be sincere and real. Somebody who's come to the conclusion that Jesus is the Lord and Savior and you must give your life to Jesus, they've come to a decision of what they think is the most sincere, real thing, and they've chosen that. You might say, well, Jesus is more of an archetypal thought form. And so whatever you think, or you decide to be Buddhist, and whatever you decide, or you decide to be an atheist, this dedication to what you think is the strongest, most real truth, is it the Koran, in what you call God, that decision, that dedication, that determination, that definition of what is the real deal, and not wanting to be distracted by what you might consider to be lies or foolishness. And it's 7 vibration. The whole thing is 7 vibration, which means they are dedicated to the truth of their ancient tradition. An internal, introverted, deep, profound internal tradition. Whether it's right or whether it's wrong, that's what's going on. It's that simple. And they see America with its Jupiterian 11 and 13 vibration. It looks wild, it looks crazy, it looks unethical, it looks, so many ways in which it's disrespectful, etc. From their point of view, the problem with these political things is people decide what's true and what's not true. In the astrology, we're not deciding what's true or not true. It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the energetic process is. Saturn, Neptune in 7 vibration? It's like crazy accurate. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like saying to a normal, a typical modern Western astrologer, oh, that person with Virgo is picky, or that person with Leo is egotistical, which I don't think is always really all that true. But those images, when I see Saturn, Neptune in a very tight opposition in 7 vibration, that's describing that whole culture, that whole way of life. And it connects to Sun, Mars, which means this is what we do. Mars is what you do. What do? We follow our religion. This is what we do. We can build our governments by it, our regulations. And Sun means a clear and present. This is what you're going to see. You go there, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see, everybody, the chants going on 5 times a day, etc. You're going to see it. It's there. This is what we do. This is what we base our actions on in our own quiet, internal, deep heritage way. Whether you like it, whether you think it's brilliant, whether you think it's wonderful, it doesn't matter what you think in terms of the astrology. What matters is that what's happening? Yes, that's what's happening. And that's what's happening at the moment of these attacks. It's an expression of their devotion to their heritage. Again, it doesn't matter what you think of it, that's what it is. It's not obvious. You might think, well, it's an explosion, it's an attack. It should just be Sun, Mars, Uranus, fine. I wouldn't expect this deep, profound commitment to their ancient visions and dreams and ideals. But yes, that's what it's for. That's the motivating force. Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. So you have Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Up here I have the aspects. Now, at the 9/11, one of them is out of orb. The Mars-Saturn sextile is out of orb. So it's using the orbs that we use in vibrational astrology, just not there. So Sun and Mars are conjunct very tightly. Sun is sextile Saturn. You see that green line. Sun is trine Neptune. That's a thicker line. It's there. The Saturn-Neptune is the thickest. So there is a Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. It's not perfectly precise and tight, but it's pretty darn strong. It's there. And then you have the Sun, Mars, Uranus that I've already talked about. That shares the Sun and Mars. So these are two overlapping patterns. Sun, Mars, Uranus, Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. And then there's a third one with Sun and Mars, which is that the Sun and Mars are opposition Mercury. And yeah, actually Uranus is got a thin line. It's Sun, Mars, and Uranus are opposition Mercury. I'm going to focus on the Sun, Mars, opposition Mercury because that's like crazy tight. 10 and 11 degrees. It's like, whoa, extremely strong. 3 overlapping patterns. Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, Sun, Mars, Uranus, and Sun, Mercury, Mars. Sun, Mercury, Mars means an engineering project. And that's what this attack was. You have to know how to fly an airplane, or you have to know how to, disable people. You have to know how, there's a lot of, this is like a big engineering marvel, unfortunately, for an extremely destructive purpose. But the application of the understanding, the clear communication, the execution of this plan in clear and present reality, those are the 3 things going on. Devotion to your religion, your God, your spirituality, the pent-up anger, that the decision to release this force. Sun, Mars, Uranus is common with athletes. It's like a martial art. Wham! This focus, this directed, controlled release of force, and the thinking through it, the planning, the implementation. That's the main thing going on right there. Now, let's look at another one. Let's look at the Boston Marathon. Same 3 configurations. Same exact. You can't, it's unbelievable. The same 3 configurations. There's a Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. In fact, it's stronger in the Boston Marathon than it is in the 9/11. This one, the Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Sun, Mars, and Neptune are all conjunct within 4 degrees. It's strong out to 9 or 10 degrees. Goes all the way out to 16 degrees. That's a very strong Sun, Mars, Neptune. And they're all square Saturn. Saturn's at 4 degrees. And they're all the lines are reasonably thick. The Mars and Neptune particularly thick. It's all there, rock solid. Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. When this Boston Marathon, I saw the news item of it, Boston Marathon killing, and I think I was watching the news 5 o'clock, or 7, I don't watch news at 5 o'clock, turned on the news around 7 o'clock, and they're talking about it, and they weren't sure, and I said, well, I pulled up the chart right away, I went to Facebook, somebody had found the time already, got the time, put it into my computer, and I said, oh, well, it's an Islamic terrorist attack. That's what it is. Very clear. I've almost no doubt about it. Because I had already done the research by 2013 and I had seen that these are the configurations. Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Oh my God. I mean, this is the strongest, clearest signature of all of them. Then Uranus is over here trining the Sun and Mars. The Sun, Uranus is extremely weak. These are very thin line. It's mainly the Mars, Uranus, but the Sun, Uranus is barely within orb. You have the Sun, Mars, Uranus with a very strong Mars, Uranus, which is the key part of this. The directed explosion. If they said there was an explosion and people got hurt and found out they died and some died. And yes, the directed explosion, the planned release of power. Why planned? Because it's 7 vibration. And there is a Sun, Mars. They're conjunct, but Mercury's not involved. Here's Mercury sitting by itself, not involved with these planets I put in yellow. This means it's not a big engineering problem. It's not a big, huge communication system. It's not like engineers sitting down and figuring out, how are we going to send this rocket to the moon kind of thing. And, how are we going to design, how are we going to get this to work? Mercury Mars means let's get it to work. Let's apply these ideas. Let's make it move. It must have been much simpler. So I already could see exactly the style. It's an Islamic terrorist attack. You can already kind of sense the bombs were fairly simply done. And then I read in the first part of this two-part series the quote from one of the brothers involved, and he said they were not part of a larger group. They were self-radicalized. They just, and especially the one brother was kind of the leader of it. He just, was watching the news. He got into it. And figuring out how to make these bombs is not that difficult. It's not a huge Sun, Mercury, Mars thing going on. I can see all of this because I know, we don't know, I have very high confidence from the previous studies that this is what's going on, and the exact way in which it varies tells me the exact variation of what's going on. It's amazing. I'm telling you, I myself am stunned when I then get the news within a few days, I don't know if it was the next day, I forget, of exactly what happened, and it's like verbatim what I saw in the chart. I can't, it's like I can't believe it. It's just unbelievable. Amazing. So I'm telling you, we really learn from the astrology what's going on. So that's how we learn and develop, by looking at examples, and then we see the fine differences between them and how they vary for the different events. Then the Ukraine war broke out, and I thought, let me look at the start of the war, and it ends up being similar. So here is a summary, before I get into the Ukraine war, of what I just said. So you can pause this if you want to read it. I've already gone through this. On the left is 9/11. On the right is the Boston Marathon bombing. So you can see the two charts, and you can see, side by side, you can compare. And here I talk about the Mars sextile Saturn out of orb, 9/11. The Saturn, Neptune, and the Sun, Mars are the most conspicuous, taking real action about the deep heritage and religious spiritual ideals, being cynical of what they consider to be American bravado, American imperialism, and American disrespect. This is, if you're a vibrational astrologer, you can just feel yourself resonating with these energies and becoming a part of them. And that's obviously what happens. And so the extreme similarity, and here I talk about the Sun, Mars, Uranus, and how that's similar in both charts, and how the Sun trine Uranus is weaker, but the Mars Uranus is very strong. So a little bit of information about that. And then the last one is the Sun, Mercury, Mars, which is really only in the 9/11. You have only the Sun, Mars in the Boston Marathon. So I've already talked about that. So now let's look at the Ukraine war and see how I saw these same exact themes in the war, which totally stunned me. Let's look at it. Number one, I've got the three things here on the upper left. The Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. The big key. Let me move this out of the way so you can read what I've got here. The invasion of Ukraine. It's not an extremist Islamic attack. I'm not expecting it to be similar. But, was I ever stunned? There's a grand trine. This is the 7 vibration chart of Sun, Saturn, Neptune. Oh my God. Do you get the feeling for this after what I've said about the other two? And there's Mars making a kite. The Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune is at least as strong in this chart as the other two charts. So I said, wow, this is a different kind of situation, but the same kind of dynamics. This is actually another religious war, which stunned me because I didn't think that's what was going on. So let's go on. How about the Sun, Mars, Uranus? There's a Sun, Mars, but the Uranus is not involved. So in that way, it's a little different from the other ones. Let's see, where are these guys? Here's Uranus down here, and there's the Sun up here in 8 Libra, and Mars at 7 Sag. So you see Sun and Mars are part of the Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, and they're sextile. Uranus is not part of it. This tells me that this was not an impulsive, and it was not so much an explosion and directed power that built up over time. This was almost fated to happen. I've got it here. That not impulsive, but almost fated to happen at some point. And it is a very strong Mercury, Sun, Mercury, Mars. Sun is opposition Mercury, there you see it, and making to Mars the trine and the sextile. It's unbelievable. The same three configurations, and all three events having slight differences that describe exactly what's going on. This is another major engineering problem, just like 9/11. Getting all of this together. But notice the Mercury trine Mars is weak, and the execution by Russia had a huge number of problems. That's very clear. Didn't go as planned. So it is a big Sun, Mercury, Mars, but the Mercury Mars is weak, not as well thought out as would have been better from Russia's point of view. But you see the same exact three themes and expressing exactly what went on. And when I saw this, I knew what the result would be. I mean, again, I say no. With very high confidence, I can say what will happen. So, and what's going to happen, I explain here on our final slide. So, in the second paragraph, what's going to happen when I see this in that chart for the beginning? I say a tenacious and persistent effort. Sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. It'll be very difficult to eradicate. Another deeply embedded 7 vibration. Near complete eradication of the enemy of the West is needed, or it keeps coming back. It'll keep coming back and get prolonged. And then, because the enemy of the West has much deeper roots than it appears, and like a plant that seems to be completely dead in winter, it comes back in spring. This is what happened with the war on terrorism. Went on and on and on, and eventually the war in Afghanistan frankly failed. The terrorists came back in full power. Didn't work after all that sacrifice, all of the trauma, all of the death, all of the expense. Didn't work. You can look at the astrology and see that. You to defeat 7 vibration, it's like pulling a plant with such deep roots. You can't just go in there and say, oh, here's a freedom, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not that easy. And I had predicted from the beginning of the Ukraine war, within 1 week, I said, this is going to go on and on and on. Because it's very difficult to eradicate. It's just the nature of the energy. It doesn't matter what I want, what I like, what I hope for, what I believe in, what my preferences are. It's just a matter of what is. So, understanding this really is tremendously helpful for knowing how to develop a reasonable strategy. And let's go back to this top paragraph. This is one of my final conclusions here. The differences between the planetary configurations of these 3 events are very subtle, extremely minor compared to their similarities. Those minor differences and subtleties explain a lot of the minor differences and subtleties in the events. The consistency is incredible. And so you can look at an event, you can see if it looks similar, if the event has some similar things, like it's an attack or an action against the Western powers. You can look to see if it's what the motivation is. If it's not these kind of configurations, it's something else. So we know what the motivation is. We know what the outcomes will be with very high accuracy. And by the way, last thing I'm going to say in the last paragraph here is American policy has generally been very naive, overly optimistic, and unclear about the ultimate goals. That's why the Afghanistan war failed. Why is that? The reasons are insensitivity to the collateral damage and its effects. It stems from the tradition of leaders, presidents, and foreign affairs leaders in the United States who have extremely strong 11 vibration and 13 vibration planetary patterns with Jupiter. Extremely consistent, both the Republicans and the Democrat presidents over recent years, and a lot of the heads of state and leaders of foreign affairs. And often Uranus is involved as well. I can make a separate video just about that if you're interested. But you can see all of the dynamics going on and why the American government has not understood what the best strategy would be. So there you have it. The main point is to understand how you can make extremely accurate predictions, and you can extend your techniques to anything that you like to use. If you use eclipses, if you use lunations, if whatever you use, if you use, asteroids, anything, Vedic techniques, go to the very similar events. Go to a source like I showed in the first video, a Wikipedia article or other sources that list similar events. Pick out the ones that have a time to the minute that look the most similar and study them, just like we always do as astrologers. Just look at them and then come up with very clear, specific, consistent rules. You can do it if it's there. If you're using the right tools, if your Vedic astrology or whatever has the capacity, it will find it, and you can apply it with amazing results and make incredibly accurate predictions. Okay, my friends, there it is. We finished part 2 in this 2-part series on how to make these kinds of predictions. I gave a very clear example of what I went through to show you the process. I didn't go through all the charts I looked at and everything. That's not important. What's important is that you've got the idea of how to do it, what was found, how it works, and going out on a limb to make these predictions, not knowing where things can possibly head, to test them. I like to do that just to test them. And the results are stunningly accurate if you watch a lot of those videos that I've made. Okay, thank you very much, my friends, for participating in this. God bless. Namaste.